She didn't inherit a home. She inherited a burned frame in the middle of nowhere. No door, no roof, no soul for miles. Just wind and whatever the fire chose to leave behind. They told her to sell it. One man even offered cash on the first day, just to watch her leave and forget this place ever stood. She said no. 3 weeks later, when the first ice storm rolled across the prairie, the entire town was standing at the door she rebuilt from ash. And knocking. Because the only place still standing in that cold belonged to her. Her name was Lynn Dow. 26 years old, born in a rail camp outside Sacramento, the kind of place where people came to work and disappear. She had never seen the Kansas prairie before the day she stepped off that wagon. The driver didn't wait. He dropped her where the track faded into grass, then turned his horses without a word. That was the last sound of company she would hear for miles. The land stretched out in every direction, flat, endless, breathing with the wind. Tall grass brushed against her skirt, dry and copper-colored under an October sky that felt too wide to belong to anyone. And in the middle of it stood what was left of her inheritance. A schoolhouse, or what used to be one. The stone foundation still held, solid, square, stubborn against time. But everything above it was charred black. The beams stood like bones. The roof had collapsed in on itself. Window frames were empty holes, and the doorway led nowhere. It wasn't a building anymore. It was what survived one. Lynn didn't move at first. She just stood there with the wind pushing against her back, a folded letter in her pocket, and every reason to turn around. She didn't. She stepped onto the foundation. The wood beneath her boots creaked, not broken, just waiting. She set her 2 trunks down near what used to be the front wall. A bedroll, a tin of seeds her mother had kept hidden for years, and $58 she had saved stitching hats for women who never remembered her name. That was everything she owned. The nearest town was 5 miles north. She walked it before sunset. A row of buildings along a narrow creek, a general store, a forge, 2 houses that leaned like they'd given up arguing with the wind. And eyes, watching her before she even stepped inside. The woman behind the counter didn't pretend not to stare. Mid-30s, work dress, hands that knew heat and iron. "You're the one who came for the burn place," she said. Lynn nodded, leaving. The woman studied her a second longer than necessary, then set down the ladle she'd been holding. "You'll need tools," she said, "and more than that." Her name was Clara Voss. Her husband ran the forge across the road. And she had already decided, this wouldn't be Lynn Dow's fight alone. Word traveled fast. By the second morning, someone else came out to see the place. He didn't knock, didn't call out, didn't ask permission. He rode in like a man who already knew how this ended. Tall, broad through the shoulders, a coat worn thin at the edges, his beard had gone gray in places that didn't come from age alone, and his eyes didn't look at her. They looked at the land. He circled the foundation once, slow, measured, then stopped. 60 acres, he said, not worth what you think. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded stack of bills. $45, he added, cash. You take it now, you walk away clean. The wind moved between them. Dry grass whispering like it had heard this before. Lynn looked at the money. Then at the burned beams behind her, then back at him. No. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, didn't try again. He just watched her. Like a man marking something for later, then turned his horse, and rode out the way he came. She stood there alone again, but not the same as before, because this time, someone had tried to take it from her. And she had chosen to stay.
The next morning, someone came on foot. Not from the road, from the open prairie, which meant he had been walking for a while. Lynn heard him before she saw him, boots through dry grass, steady, unhurried. He stopped at the edge of the foundation. Didn't step up, didn't speak. Just looked. Not at her, at the structure. At the beams, the joints, the way the fire had moved through the wood, and the parts it had spared. "Green oak," he said finally. His voice was rough, like it had been used more for weather than conversation. "Whoever built this, used green oak." Lynn turned toward him. He was older, not weak, just worn into shape. White beard cut close. Shoulders slightly bent, but not from surrender, from years of carrying weight. He stepped onto the foundation now. Ran his hand along one of the charred beams. Pressed his thumb into the surface, testing. "Burned outside," he murmured, still holding inside. He glanced at her. First time. Quick. Sharp. "You planning to tear it down?" "No." A beat. Then, a small nod. Not approval. Recognition. "Good." His name was Elias Boom. He lived somewhere south of the creek, in a cabin most people didn't bother walking out to. He didn't offer help, not directly. He just stayed, and started pointing things out. "That beam holds. This one's hollow. You lose that corner in a hard wind." By midday, he had mapped the entire structure in his head. And by afternoon, he had decided something. "We don't rebuild it," he said. Lynn frowned slightly. "We build inside it." He stepped back, gesturing with one hand. "The outer frame stays. It already survived fire. It'll break the wind." Inside, he tapped the stone foundation with his boot. "We raise a second wall. New timber. Tight." Between the two, he paused, searching for the word like it mattered. "We pack it." "With what?" He looked at her again, longer this time. "Clay. Straw. Water. Old method. Done right," he added quietly. "It'll hold heat like a kiln." The wind shifted, colder. Lynn glanced up at the broken roof, then back at him. "When do we start?" Elias didn't answer right away. Like he was measuring her, not her strength, but her staying. "Tomorrow," he said. "First light." Then he turned, and walked off the way he came. No goodbye, no promise. He still showed up. Every morning. Before the sun cleared the horizon. With tools wrapped in oiled cloth. Old ones. Smooth from years of use. He worked like a man who didn't waste motion. No extra words. No explanations he didn't have to give. He showed her how to brace the beams. How to cut clean joints. How to test wood without breaking it. The first time her hands bled, he didn't stop her. Just passed her a strip of cloth. "Tie it tight," he said. "Then keep going." By the fourth day, they weren't alone anymore. Clara Voss sent her boy with a wagon, tools, nails, a sack of flour that Lynn hadn't paid for. "Store credit," the boy muttered. The next morning, a woman arrived on foot, thin, straight-backed, carrying a leather satchel like it held something important. She stopped at the foundation, looked at the frame, then at Lynn. "If you rebuild it," she said, "I'll teach in it. No wages. Just a room. And a stove." Her name was Margaret Hale, widowed, 3 winters alone, and something in her voice didn't ask, it chose. Lynn nodded once. "Then we build you a room." By the end of the week, there were 5 of them, not hired, not organized, just there, working, carrying, cutting, lifting. No one said it out loud, but the place had changed. It wasn't empty anymore.
It was becoming something. Not just a building. Something people were starting to belong to.
By the second week, the prairie started watching back. Not with eyes. With weather. The wind shifted first, colder, sharper. It didn't pass through anymore, it pressed. Against the beams, against the new inner walls they had raised. Against every gap they hadn't sealed yet. Like it was testing them. Elias noticed it before anyone said a word. He always did. "Pack faster," he said one morning, not looking up from his work. Cold's coming early. They worked harder after that. Clay, straw, water, again. Their hands stopped feeling clean, stopped feeling soft, stopped feeling like they belonged to the lives they had before. Lynn's palms split open by the third day of packing. She wrapped them, kept working, didn't say a word. Margaret's hands trembled the first time she lifted the mallet, not from weakness, from unfamiliar weight. By the end of that same day, they didn't tremble anymore, they struck. Steady, certain. Elias watched all of it, quiet. He didn't praise, didn't correct unless it mattered, but once, just once, when Lynn packed a section too loose, he stepped in behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat off his coat. "Not like that," he said. He took her wrist, not rough, not gentle either, just enough to guide. "Push from the shoulder," he added, "not the hands." He let go, stepped back, didn't look at her again. But the next section she packed, held. By the third week, the walls were done, double-layered, packed tight, heavy with something that didn't look like strength, but felt like it. Like warmth waiting. They moved to the roof, cedar shingles, cut clean, laid in rows that overlapped like scales. Clara climbed up with them, didn't ask permission, didn't come down. "I've done worse," she muttered once, and kept working. That was the morning he came back. The man with the offer. He didn't ride fast, didn't need to. He knew they would see him, knew they couldn't ignore him. He stopped at the edge of the track, didn't dismount this time. Just sat there, watching, counting, measuring, judging. "How much did you spend?" he called out. No one answered. His gaze settled on Lynn. "Survive winter. The wind will tear it open. The cold will crack your walls. And when it does," he leaned forward slightly in the saddle, "I'll still be here." Silence. Elias didn't turn, didn't speak. Kept working, hammer striking wood with steady rhythm. Clara didn't look down, Margaret didn't stop fitting glass. Lynn stepped forward, slow, measured. She stopped at the edge of the roof. Looked down at him. "Then you can watch it stand." The wind moved between them again, colder now. He held her gaze a second longer than before, then gave a small nod, not agreement. A promise. He turned his horse, rode out. No one spoke after that. But something had shifted. This wasn't just work anymore, it wasn't just survival. It had become a line, and they had chosen which side they stood on. That night, they lit the stove for the first time. The fire caught slow, then steady. Heat spread through the room, not fast, but deep. It stayed. Elias pressed his palm against the inner wall, closed his eyes. Waited. Then nodded. "It'll hold." Outside, the wind didn't stop, it only got stronger.
The storm didn't arrive all at once. It crept in. A thin glaze on the grass before dawn. A soft ticking on the roof that didn't sound like rain. Then, it stayed. By midday, the prairie was turning to glass. Every fence line, every branch, every blade of grass, locked under a skin of ice. The sky flattened into gray, and the wind began to rise. Inside the schoolhouse,
the fire held, low, steady, deep in the stove. The walls didn't breathe the way old structures did. They held. Elias noticed that first. Of course, he did. "Feed it slow," he said. "Don't chase heat." Lynn nodded. Already doing it. By the second day, things started breaking. Not here, out there. A barn roof collapsed 3 miles north. Someone's chimney split clean down the middle. Cattle froze standing. And the roads disappeared. The first knock came just before dusk. Soft, like someone unsure they should be asking. Lynn opened the door. A family stood there, half covered in ice. A man holding a child inside his coat. A woman with frozen lashes and shaking hands. Their wagon was gone. Their house, worse. "Come in," Lynn said. She didn't ask questions. Didn't hesitate. Just stepped aside. By morning, there were 8. By noon, 12. They didn't come together. They came in ones. Twos. Families wrapped in blankets and silence. Each one carrying the same look, they had run out of somewhere else to go. Clara arrived pulling a sled. No wheels. Just runners tied with rope. Supplies stacked high, flour, dried beans, whatever she could salvage. "I'm not letting this place starve," she muttered. And stayed. Margaret cleared a corner. Books out. Children gathered without being called. Not for lessons, for something normal. By the third day, the number passed 20. The stove never went out. Men took turns feeding it. Boys hauled wood until their arms gave out. Women cooked in whatever pots they had brought. No one complained. There was no room for it. The walls held. The heat stayed. It didn't escape into the wind the way it should have. It stayed inside, like the building had decided, to keep them. On the 4th day, the door opened again. This time, no one knocked. They were too tired. Lynn stepped forward. Opened it fully. A wagon stood there, barely upright.
Horses shaking. And on the seat, the man who had offered to buy the land. His coat was stiff with ice. His hands, raw. Behind him, his family. No words left. No pride left either. He didn't speak, didn't climb down. Just sat there, like he didn't know if he was allowed to move. The wind cut between them, hard, cold enough to take breath away. Lynn stepped closer, reached for the wagon, steadying it. Then looked up at him. "Come inside." That was all. No mention of the offer. No reminder. No debt. Just a door held open. He climbed down, slow. Lifted his wife in his arms. Carried her past Lynn, into the warmth. Didn't look at her. Couldn't. By nightfall, there were more than 30 people inside. Children sleeping shoulder to shoulder near the stove. Voices low. Movement careful. The storm didn't ease, but inside, it didn't reach them. Elias stood by the wall, hand pressed flat against it again. Feeling, listening. Then he looked at Lynn. It's doing its job. Outside, the prairie broke. Inside, they didn't. The storm broke, without warning. No slow easing, no gentle thaw. Just light. A hard, white sun pushing through the gray, spilling across a land that didn't look the same anymore. Fences bent, roofs gone, tracks erased. The prairie had been rewritten overnight. Inside the schoolhouse, no one moved at first. Like if they stayed still, the warmth might disappear. Like it had been a dream. Then a child laughed. Soft, uncertain, but real. That was enough. The door opened. Cold air rushed in, sharp, clean, alive again. And one by one, they stepped out. 32 people walked out of that building. Alive.
unfrozen. They stood in the open, looking back. At the thing they almost didn't believe in. The burned frame, the new walls, the roof that held. Still standing. Not perfect, but unbroken. The man who had tried to buy it, stood apart from the others. Hat in his hands, eyes lowered. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he walked forward. Slow, measured. Stopped a few steps from Lynn. "I was wrong," he said, not loud, not for anyone else. Just for her. "I thought this land needed a stronger owner." He looked up now, it needed someone who wouldn't leave. Silence. The wind moved through what was left of the grass, softer now. Lynn didn't step closer, didn't step away. She just held his gaze. This place wasn't waiting to be owned. It was waiting to be kept. He nodded, once, that was all he had. The rebuilding took weeks. Then months. But no one worked alone anymore. Elias walked from house to house, showing men how to pack walls the right way. Clara organized food runs across the prairie, quiet, efficient, unasked. Margaret opened her books again. Children sat on the floor beneath those same beams, learning letters. In a place that had almost never existed, and Lynn stayed, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because now, this place had somewhere to be. Winter came again. And when it did, people didn't wait for the storm to break them. They came early. Brought wood, food, voices. The schoolhouse filled before the cold could empty anything else. Years passed. The burned beams stayed where they were, black against the sky.
A reminder, not of what was lost, but of what held. They built a small room off the back, then another, a desk, a stove, a place for someone to stay. And no one ever called it just a school again. They called it the place that didn't fall. And if you asked the oldest people in that county why it stood when everything else gave way, they wouldn't talk about the walls, or the roof, or the way it was built. They would say it was because a young woman arrived with nothing, and chose not to leave. And somehow, that was enough to make others stay too.